They told me I was overinvested in people. That's the phrase they used. Not ineffective, not underperforming, just too focused on people. My name is Callum Dreyer. I'm 43, and for 16 years, I was the heart of Argonix Capital's operations. I wasn't the loudest in the room. I didn't dress to impress or sell illusions in meetings, but I made things work, real things. I built a system that actually functioned, with teams that thrived because they trusted one another. I stayed late to mentor new hires, took the time to understand why a good analyst suddenly started missing targets. I fought for ethics in a company that saw compassion as a cost. And for a while, it worked. The founders respected me. I had autonomy, a team I handpicked, and results that spoke for themselves. We hit our KPIs. We kept attrition low. My division was lean, consistent, and scandal-free. Then Troy Mitchell arrived. The visionary hire, early 30s, MBA from somewhere expensive, a resume that read like a brag sheet. His first week, he called my team's methods archaic. By month 2, he was promoting people based on charisma instead of competence. I warned leadership, told them we were heading into dangerous territory, fast hires, shallow onboarding, pressure cooker targets. They told me to adapt or step aside. I didn't step aside. I kept pushing back, quietly, strategically, until one morning I walked into my office and my ID card didn't work. I was told my role was phased out due to restructuring. No exit interview, no thank you. Just a cardboard box and a security escort. 16 years, gone. Because I cared more about humans than optics. But what they didn't realize was how many people still cared about me. I drove home that afternoon in silence. Not the stunned kind. Not the broken kind either. It was the silence of clarity. When you've given nearly 2 decades of your life to something you built, and they throw you out like a printer that's jammed too many times, you don't just walk away. You remember. You remember every late night spent cleaning up someone else's mess, every win you handed them on a silver platter, every time you kept your mouth shut for the sake of team harmony. And you start to wonder, what would happen if you stopped playing nice? The next few days were quiet, but inside, I was moving. I didn't scream on LinkedIn. I didn't rage post. That's not my style. Instead, I went through every contact I had, not just clients, but vendors, junior employees, HR folks I'd helped navigate conflict, even a few competitors I'd met at conferences who respected how I handled pressure. I made one promise in every call. I don't have a fancy pitch, just a vision built on integrity, efficiency, and people who care. And people listened. By the end of month 1, I had 3 consulting offers, all from firms that had quietly grown tired of dealing with Argonex's new culture under Troy. By month 2, I launched Dryer Gray with an old colleague who had also jumped ship. We didn't chase headlines. We didn't beg for attention. But word travels fast in finance, especially when clients notice that deadlines get met, budgets stay in check, and their inboxes don't fill up with excuses. Meanwhile, Argonix started to fumble. A few clients walked. Then a project fell through. Then I got a message from a former analyst. Troy's team is burning out. 2 managers quit this week. They're blaming each other. It's chaos. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because karma doesn't need a stage. But I had more than karma in mind. By the 3rd month, Dryer Gray wasn't just a whisper in the industry anymore. We were a quiet storm, subtle but steady. And we were taking back everything that had been stolen from us, piece by piece. I didn't go after Argonix out of spite. I went after what they'd neglected: the people, the partnerships, the trust that had made it strong in the first place. All the things Troy had discarded in his race to polish his ego. Our reputation grew faster than I expected. Clients weren't just moving to us, they were warning others away from Argonix. I heard things like, "We used to feel safe there. Now we feel like numbers." One even told me, "The new team talks a lot, but they never say anything." And then came the real test. An investment group, a major one, reached out. They were managing a series of infrastructure portfolios that were formerly under Argonix advisement. The group had lost faith after a string of failed forecasts and missed growth targets. They asked if we'd be willing to step in as strategic advisors. It wasn't just big, it was massive. I remember sitting in the meeting room, the same kind of cold, high-rise conference space I used to hate, except this time, I was at the head of the table. And this time, I spoke on my own terms. Why, I laid out our methodology. I spoke about stability, sustainability, real partnership. I could see their faces shift, the way they leaned forward, the way they nodded, not just to be polite, but because the words meant something. When the handshake happened, I didn't smile for them. I smiled for the version of me that Troy had fired, the version they thought was too careful, too measured, too human. They signed with us. It was the same day Argonic's quarterly report dropped, and with it, the news that 3 board members had resigned. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to, because I knew the storm was just beginning for them. A few days later, I received a message. No subject line, no signature, just a single sentence. We should talk. Things are falling apart here. It was from Danica, one of the last remaining execs I used to mentor someone who once fought tooth and nail to modernize Argonex from within before Troy clipped her wings. We met in a quiet cafe in Midtown. She looked tired, eyes shadowed, posture tense. She didn't waste time. Troy's trying to blame you, she said. He's saying you planted people, sabotaged deals. I blinked once. Did you believe him? She scoffed. Please, he's unraveling. But he still holds power, until someone removes him for good. She paused, then slid a flash drive across the table. Internal emails, expense reports, recordings. You didn't just build the foundation, Callum. You were the compass. He twisted everything. But there's still a way to set things right. If you want to. I stared at it for a moment. The flash drive felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the data, but because of what it meant. This wasn't just business anymore. This was Judgment Day. And I wasn't going to blink. I didn't rush. I took that flash drive home and stared at it for hours. I didn't sleep that night, not because of doubt, but because I wanted to be sure. I wanted to do this right. No grand reveal, no messy drama. Just precision. Just truth. By morning, I'd made my decision. I called up an old friend, Amir, a journalist I'd helped years ago, when Argonex tried to bury a worker safety scandal under layers of NDAs and legal threats. He still owed me a favor. And Amir? He had teeth. I didn't hand him everything. Just enough to start pulling the thread, enough to draw attention without tipping Troy off too early. We needed noise, but we needed timing more. Meanwhile, I worked quietly with Danica. She wasn't alone. 3 other executives were ready to come forward, all with their own files, their own receipts. Years of suppressed voices, gaslighting, betrayal. It all started to form a web, and Troy? He was sitting right in the center of it. And then, as if the universe wanted poetic symmetry, Argonex announced their upcoming annual investor summit. Perfect. 1 week before the summit, Amir's article dropped. The headline? Inside Argonex, a culture of silence, greed, and collapse. It was a masterstroke built on facts, not fire. A timeline of negligence, overspending, the exit of top talent, and the quiet rise of drier gray. My name was mentioned once, not as a savior, but as a benchmark. A ghost of integrity. That was enough. Investors panicked. Journalists swarmed. Argonex PR team scrambled to deny everything, but for the first time, their words didn't stick. Then came the summit. I wasn't invited, of course I wasn't. But I didn't need to be inside, because I had already arranged what would happen outside. As Troy stood on stage, desperately trying to hold the narrative, a group of former employees, the ones he'd humiliated, discarded, silenced, stood outside the venue, holding signs that read, "We built this, he burned it. Ask about the bonuses, ask about the fraud." We followed a leader, not a tyrant. It wasn't chaos, it was clarity. And inside, investors were already voting to suspend Troy indefinitely pending investigation. That same night, I received a voicemail. No name, just a familiar voice, strained, trembling. You win. I hope it was worth it. I deleted it. Not because I didn't care, but because I refused to let his voice live rent-free in my life any longer. The fallout came quickly after that. By the end of the week, Troy's name was stripped from the leadership page. An interim CEO was appointed. The board released a public statement full of hollow words like realignment and cultural reevaluation, but everyone knew what it meant. He was gone. No fanfare, no farewell post, no redemption arc. Just erased. But for me, it wasn't over. Not really, because winning doesn't always feel like victory. I'd imagined this moment so many times, what I'd say to him, how I'd look him in the eye and remind him exactly who I was. But that call, that broken voice whispering, "You win," that was his ending. And I realized I didn't need mine to include him. So I turned inward. I took a few days off, real days off. I went upstate where cell reception dies and the stars actually show themselves. I sat by a lake I hadn't seen in 20 years, the same lake where my father once told me, "Son, if you ever have to burn a bridge, make sure you don't plan on swimming back." I smiled at that memory because I hadn't just burned a bridge, I'd built a new one that others were already crossing. Danica joined my firm officially. 2 others followed. We didn't grow fast, we grew right. Clients came not because of flashy campaigns, but because of trust. Because in a world of noise, we chose to whisper until it was time to roar. 3 months later, I was asked to speak at a leadership conference. Me, the quiet strategist, the redundant middle manager. I stepped onto that stage with no slides, no mic tricks, just a story. My story. About loyalty, about betrayal, about how sometimes the best revenge isn't sabotage, it's success done silently. And when I finished, the applause wasn't thunderous. It was solid. It was earned. Afterward, a young woman came up to me, eyes wide, notebook in hand. "Mr. Dervin," she said, "how did you stay so calm through all of it?" I smiled. I didn't, but I stayed focused. Anger burns fast. Purpose, that lasts. And as I left the auditorium, one final notification blinked on my phone. A news alert. Former Argonics CEO under federal review for financial misconduct. No name in the headline. No need. Because the world finally saw the truth. And I was already walking toward the next sunrise. The news rippled across the industry like a lightning strike through dry brush. Everyone had heard whispers about Argonics before, about the pressure cooker environment, the unexplained exits, the sudden shifts in leadership. But now the whispers had a name, a timeline, a pattern. And in the center of it all stood Troy Delaney. The articles didn't hold back. Investigations cited discrepancies in financial reports, unapproved bonuses, employee mistreatment, even the suspicious resignation of a former whistleblower who'd vanished into an NDA-bound silence. That part hit hard. I knew exactly who they meant. I read each article carefully, not with triumph, but with gravity. Troy had built his kingdom with arrogance and paper walls, and those walls were finally collapsing. But I didn't go on social media to gloat. I didn't drop snide comments or bask in schadenfreude. Instead, I turned off my phone and took a train to see my mother. She lived in a quiet suburb, tucked away from all the chaos and clamor of corporate life. When I walked in, she was in the garden, hands covered in soil, humming something from decades ago. She looked up, squinting in the sun. "You look tired," she said gently. "I think I'm finally not," I replied. That night over tea, I told her everything. Not the press version, the real version. She listened in silence. When I finished, she reached across the table and held my hand. "You always had a fire in you, Callum," she said. "You just finally stopped using it to keep everyone else warm." Those words sank deep. She was right. For years, I had exhausted myself trying to protect a place that never valued me. I had worn silence like armor and mistaken duty for destiny. But now I was free. Back in the city, my firm was thriving. We weren't the biggest, but we were becoming the most trusted, and that meant more. We hosted workshops, not just on strategy or finance, but on leadership with integrity. We offered mentorships to professionals who had been overlooked or underestimated, people like I once was. One day I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a simple note: "You saved more than just yourself. Thank you." That was all. But I sat there, letter in hand, eyes wet, breath still, because that was the moment I knew this story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every person who'd ever been told they were replaceable, every quiet worker who'd been betrayed, every leader who chose compassion over cruelty and paid for it. I hung the note on the corkboard in my office, next to a small plaque my team had gifted me. Integrity is quiet until it wins. And it had. Not with fanfare, not with vengeance, but with purpose. It had been exactly 1 year to the day since I walked out of Argonics for the last time. Not a dramatic exit, not one of those cinematic final speeches, just a man carrying his dignity in silence. But now, looking back, I realized that was the loudest thing I could have done. Gravitas Consulting, my firm, had grown, but not explosively. No overnight viral success, no outlandish investor flood. Just a steady, intentional climb built on word of mouth and actual trust. We took on clients who'd been burned before, people who said they were done with corporate sharks, but still believed in doing good work. I saw the weariness in their eyes, the same one I'd once seen in my own mirror. I made a rule early on. No offices with closed doors, everyone had a voice, everyone's ideas mattered, and you could feel the difference the second you walked in. Laughter, debate, transparency. One day I found myself sitting in a strategy session with Maya, one of our newest hires, a sharp 27-year-old who'd been let go from a major firm for being too direct. She was presenting a bold, risky idea for a retail client. Midway through, she paused. "Sorry," she said, looking unsure. "This might be too much." I leaned forward. "You were hired because you think differently, not despite it." She smiled, just a little, but it reminded me of myself back when I needed someone to say those exact words. Later that week, I got an anonymous tip. Troy had resurfaced. Not as a CEO, but as a consultant for a mid-tier investment firm trying to rebrand. The firm hadn't made a formal announcement, but I recognized the pattern. Silent rehiring, backdoor influence, a slow, creeping return. Some part of me tensed. I thought I was done with him. Thought I'd moved past all of it. But there he was again, slipping into a new mask. And I had a decision to make. I didn't want revenge. That part of me was long gone. But I couldn't stay silent. I gathered every verifiable thread I could, cross-checked press releases, board statements, SEC filings. And then I did something that surprised even me. I sent a letter. Not to the press, to the board of directors. It was brief, respectful, professional. It outlined the pattern, cited public records, and simply asked a question. Is this who you want guiding your future? I never got a reply. But 2 weeks later, the firm announced a strategic redirection, and Troy's name disappeared once again from any traceable asset. This time, I felt no satisfaction, just relief, like someone had shut a window I didn't realize was still open. And as for me, I returned to my team, to the meetings, the mentorships, the projects that actually mattered. Because the best way to win isn't to burn bridges behind you. It's to build something so solid, so honest, that the ghosts of the past can't follow. And I was building just that. Brick by quiet brick. 3 years had passed since the fall of Argonics and the rise of Gravitas Consulting. 3 long, full, beautiful years. In those years, I'd watched something rare unfold, not just a company growing, but people healing, finding their voice, I watched interns become leaders, watched ex-corporate refugees come in hunched with distrust and eventually walk straighter, laugh louder. We weren't perfect, but we were real. One rainy November evening, as I sat alone in my office, glass walls, warm lighting, jazz humming low from my speakers, I got a message I hadn't expected in a long time. From Lila Morin. My heart skipped. Lila had been my right hand at Argonix. Brilliant, kind, quietly powerful. When the knives came out in the final months, she'd tried to warn me, but she'd also stayed behind. Someone needs to protect the junior team, she had said. Her message was simple. Are you free for coffee this week? Something's happening. We met the next morning at a small cafe tucked behind an old bookshop, the kind that always smelled like stories and secrets. She looked tired, still elegant, still composed, but her eyes told me everything. I stayed behind because I thought I could fix things, she said, wrapping her hands around her mug. But they're worse now, Callum. Much worse. Argonix hadn't recovered. After Troy's quiet departure, they installed a revolving door of executives, each one more lost than the last. Culture collapsed. Projects failed. HR scandals leaked. Whispers of misused pension funds were spreading like oil and water. They're desperate now, she said, and they want to pin it on someone with credibility. I felt that old fire flicker. Not anger, something deeper. A need for justice, not revenge. I came to you, she added, because I know what kind of man you are, and because I think this might be the final blow. She handed me a flash drive, encrypted, labeled with one word, proof. That night, back in my office, I poured a whiskey, locked the door, and opened the files. Emails, transactions, names. A 2-year trail of deceit painting a picture of a company cannibalizing itself from the inside. Bonuses being funneled through ghost contractors. Severance paid out to people who never worked there. Quiet payouts to silence whistleblowers. And then, one file with my name on it. Forged memos. Drafted by someone inside, painting me as part of the corruption. Preparing, I realized, to pin the fall on me retroactively. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. What followed was the hardest month of my life. Not because I was afraid, but because I had to be careful. I had a company now, a team. I couldn't just go scorched earth. So I moved like a surgeon. Precise. Quiet. I brought in one of the best legal advisors in the city, Mira Devane, a former federal investigator with a reputation for making CEOs sweat. I trusted her with everything. Together we compiled a case, not for the press, and for the authorities. We sent it off to 3 entities at once, the IRS, the SEC, and the Department of Labor. And then, we waited. 2 weeks later, federal agents raided Argonix headquarters. It was a quiet story in the press at first, ongoing audit, they called it. But by the end of the month, it was front-page news. Former executives arrested, shareholders suing, pension funds frozen, people demanding accountability. And through it all, I remained silent. Until one Friday morning, a reporter cornered me outside our office. "Mr. Callum Rhodes?" she asked, breathless. "Any comment on the Argonix scandal?" I stopped, looked her in the eye, and said calmly, "Truth doesn't need commentary. It just needs time." 6 months later, Gravitas was stronger than ever. Lila had joined us as chief operating officer. Maya, the once nervous strategist, now led an entire division. We had opened offices in 2 more cities, and I had finally started sleeping again. One evening, standing by the large windows of our new downtown building, I looked out over the city lights. So much had changed. But at my core, I was still the same man who walked out of Argonix holding a box and a promise. Only now the box was gone. And the promise? The promise had become a legacy. The end was never loud. It came on a Tuesday. The sky was pale, the air cool, and the world moved on like nothing extraordinary had happened. But for me, and for everyone who had ever been underestimated, cast aside, or told they were too idealistic, it was the day the circle finally closed. A letter arrived at our office. Not digital, not a lawyer, a letter, handwritten, Mr. Rhodes, I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to know you were right. TM, TM, Troy Marston. The man who once looked me in the eye and said, "You're replaceable." And now, he'd lost everything. Stripped of his titles, facing indictments, banned from holding executive roles for a decade. But I didn't feel joy reading his note. I didn't feel pity either. I felt peace. Because the truth has a rhythm. It may stumble, it may stutter, but it never stays buried. That evening, we held a quiet celebration. No champagne towers, no fireworks, just the team on our rooftop, bathed in golden light as the city pulsed beneath us. Laughter, music, the kind of warmth that can't be faked. And I realized this wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about reclaiming dignity. Lila stood beside me, glass in hand. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head. "We did." She smiled. "What's next?" I looked out at the horizon, the wind brushing against my face. 1,000 new beginnings danced in the distance. "We keep building," I said, "but not just a company, a standard." Because Gravitas had become more than a firm. It was a lighthouse for the underestimated, the discarded, the ones who'd been told to sit down and stay quiet. Now, they were the ones running the show. And me, I was just a man who refused to stay small. So, if you're out there, holding your breath in a job that doesn't see you, in a place that drains your light, remember this. Sometimes the worst day of your career is the first day of your legacy. And when the world underestimates the quiet ones, that's when the real story begins.